before U.S. Special Forces carried out the raid to capture Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuelan president was all smiles at the palace with China's top envoy to Latin America. It appeared to be business as usual, Maduro praising Beijing's leadership and President Xi Jinping as a brother. What would soon follow was a shock to the world and be seen as a slap in the face for Beijing.
It is somewhat embarrassing for China when our special envoy is still visiting the country, certainly.
What happened threatens to upend a strategic partnership China cultivated for 2 decades. That's made Beijing a key political backer to Venezuela, as well as a financial lifeline. Since 2000, China has handed out $106 billion in loans to Venezuela for infrastructure. That's according to aid data, a group that tracks Beijing's overseas lending. Those loans were being repaid in oil, with about 80% of Venezuela's crude exports going to China as U.S. sanctions closed off other markets. It's only a small fraction, less than 10% of China's oil imports, but Venezuela still owes about $10 billion. But beyond loans and oil, it's China's influence in Latin America that's at stake. Xi Jinping has done 5 trips to the region in the past decade as he's looked to nurture a statesman role across the global south. The U.S. saying it will run Venezuela and control its oil will undercut China's sway.
This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live, and we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
At the same time, the U.S. has handed China a new opportunity to assert its own sphere of influence in East Asia. Chinese social media was on fire this week with the idea that the U.S. attack plan could be a blueprint for China to take Taiwan.
Welcome to the video, everyone. This is Justin Paul. So just doing a reaction here to this video that I was looking at on NBC News, basically detailing how Xi Jinping and Beijing, China, how he's looking at he and his administration, how they're looking at the operation that happened in Venezuela with the United States. And they did have a special envoy that was over there during the time they were visiting Venezuela, visiting Maduro. And as you heard there, they've loaned Venezuela billions of dollars, of course, and they're getting their repayment in oil. They loaned them the money, of course, for infrastructure. And I feel like we knew that they were there, and kind of wanted to send a little message. Yes. Do I believe that they can take a page out of our playbook when they're approaching Taiwan? Yes, I do believe that as well. But China, which we do know is a part of BRICS, they definitely want to, position themselves to have a partner to where they could get crude oil. And it says over 80% of Venezuela's crude oil was going over to China. And that also ties into some of the oil tankers that were seized by the United States, because, they were allegedly, some of those oil tankers were heading over to China. All of this really, increases the tensions between the U.S. and China. I feel like a lot of this is just playing chess, political chess, really. And, everyone's kind of jockeying for partnerships or resources to put themselves in a position to where, they end up being the big dog pretty much. So, they were saying Xi Jinping has taken, 5 or more trips to Venezuela, definitely trying to, keep nurturing the relationship that he had with the leadership over there. And now with the United States, basically Trump saying, hey, we're going to run, this aspect as far as like the oil of Venezuela. And, I really feel like they need to help them, elect a leader that the people want to lead them. I feel like they need to do that. But we do know, of course, Russia and China, they're going to have, if they can have it their way, they definitely would have strategic partnerships with Venezuela, because for oil for definitely number one. And you know, here we are. It's again a political geopolitical game of chess, and from Venezuela to Greenland, these are some of the places that all of these world leaders they want to have in their back pocket, so to say. So just know, when countries take money from other countries, like billions of dollars in loans in exchange for, like natural resources like oil, you know you just become their bitch pretty much. You become like their side piece, or or like a woman that they're courting type thing. So China and Beijing, they're definitely feeling a certain type of way. And as they were saying in China's social media, it's just going around saying the U.S. has pretty much gave China a blueprint on how they could, handle their discrepancies that they have with Taiwan.
Which Beijing considers part of its territory. When asked about it, President Trump told the New York Times the Venezuela raid was in response to a, quote, real threat, that it does not set a precedent for other countries. And speaking of Xi Jinping, saying it's up to him regarding what China does in Taiwan. Officially, China has condemned the U.S. action in Venezuela, calling it a serious violation of international law, and has repeatedly demanded Maduro's release. Whether Beijing is willing or able to offer more than rhetorical support for Maduro isn't clear, exposing to China's partners, in its own way, the limits of Chinese backing.
That has been the formula of the Chinese diplomacy for decades. So we're not allies. We can be good diplomatic partners, economic partners, but when it comes to security, there's not much China can do. That's a reality.
China is looking to protect its assets in oil field systems, telecom, and mining, as well as 2 satellite ground stations there. The future of Beijing's influence will depend on who ultimately controls Venezuela. The interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, embracing the envoys of Russia, Iran, and China at her inauguration earlier this week. Since then, she's made concessions to the United States, with President Trump signaling to China, stay out of America's backyard. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
So, one thing we do know is Russia, Iran, China, they're all, part of that BRICS committee, and, trying to move away from like Western finance systems and stuff like that. And as you see, as like the temporary or new leader of Venezuela was sworn in, she greeted Chinese, Russian and Iranian diplomats. She definitely greeted them. They were there, and definitely trying to pull Venezuela into the fold. Of course, for strategic regions, and it's gonna be interesting to see how everything kind of plays out. The U.S. is definitely not trying to take their hands off Venezuela. We know that, and with the whole China and Taiwan thing, from everything I'm hearing and everything that I read, China feels like Taiwan is a part of their country. They feel like that's their territory, and I don't know if they're going to make a move on that territory within this year. They said it was gearing up for something in 2027, so. We'll just have to keep our eyes open and see, what becomes of all this. But yeah, basically, man, China says, hey, y'all still owe us like, 10 billion, and of course they're gonna want to collect on that money, and if they've only, been loaned over 100 billion, and they've already, gotten, at least 90 billion back in oil, that's a lot. But they were saying, that the oil that they're getting, even though 80% of the oil from Venezuela is, being traded to China, they're saying that that 80% from Venezuela is only 10% of the oil that, China brings in. And basically breaking down to the fact that, security wise, China really has their hands tied and really not able to really do much but more than just, petition for Maduro to be released and to denounce his arrest and capture by the United States. So again, we'll see how this plays out. All of it is pretty much jockeying for position, and these world leaders, man, they sit around. They have a lot of guys who, had the brains and give them advice and stuff like that, and we'll just see how it plays out. I don't feel like Trump is playing with any of these countries. I feel like anything that he has said, at this point, I believe that he will do. So we'll just have to see how stuff plays out here in the long run. But I'm gonna close out. If you like my content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. If you have any like content suggestions, I'm definitely down to listen to any suggestions from any of my subscribers, and um, I do appreciate everyone who has subscribed. I think I'm almost at 250 subscribers. So moving along here, trying to stay super consistent and just trying to be like more selective as far as like the stories that I cover. A lot of this geopolitical stuff is kind of heating up, and um, definitely interested in everything that's going on there, as well as here in the United States. A lot of the news that's going on in the United States is, violence or robberies and stuff like that. So, if any of those stories stick out to me, I definitely want to bring them to everybody's attention, as well as like AI stuff. Of course, what's going on with Grok and the explicit images and stuff like that. So, just trying to be well versed and try to incorporate some sports, try to incorporate some hip hop, just try to incorporate a few things like that. Haven't really felt the need to try to go the whole men women relationship route, man. It's so many content creators out here who talk about that type of stuff. It's just like, it's only so much you can say about that type of stuff that hasn't been said. And I feel like, guys like Coach Greg Adams and Anton Daniels, they really speak about a lot of that stuff, and they do a great job. So, and that's just to name a few. But maybe we'll get there one day, as the channel grows and expands. So we'll see. But this is Justin Paul. Go ahead and close out, guys. Peace.